One of the most exciting things during your travel is, of course, shopping for foreign goods to bring home, whether as a reminder of your amazing trip or simply because you are visiting the best country to buy these particular items from. But while buying a simple decorative souvenir for your shelf doesn't require much research or preparation beforehand, when it comes to more significant purchases, you really want to be well prepared and make sure that you are getting authentic items at fair prices. In my previous video, I shared some tips about what you should be aware of when visiting Medinas in Morocco. And today I would like to talk about one of them in more depth. In particular, buying some common goods in Medina that are very popular among tourists: saffron, argan oil, and rugs. As I mentioned before, not everything you buy in Medina will be authentic. In fact, you might find more authentic goods outside of Medina because lots of shops in the old town are tourist focused unless you know particular streets within Medina where locals normally do their shopping. After all, in many countries, tourists are frequently targeted with fake products, especially high-value items, due to their presumed lack of local knowledge and usually their one-time visit status. So let's start from the easier purchase and move to the most difficult one. Saffron. First, let's talk about saffron. If you're planning to buy saffron in Morocco, it is very important to know that there are several fake alternatives out there. The most popular being safflower and corn silk. These are quite common, especially in touristy areas, so take some time to learn what real saffron looks like before making a purchase. Real saffron consists of very thin thread-like strands or stigmas that are deep red in color, often with lighter orange tips. They typically have a trumpet-like shape, slightly pointy at one end and wider at the other. Sometimes you'll see just small broken pieces of the strands, and this is absolutely normal because they're quite fragile. Just look for a few whole ones to examine the quality. The highest quality saffron has pretty long stigmas, and their trumpet-like ends are wider than those on the lower quality saffron. Now let's have a look at a couple of alternatives. Safflower is one of the most prevalent saffron substitutes you might encounter. However, it has much larger petal-like structures rather than threads, and they're typically bright red or orange rather than deep red, and they look more like small flower petals. Honestly, although people do buy safflower thinking that it is saffron, in my opinion, they look quite different, and unless you don't know what saffron looks like at all and its key features, you won't really confuse one for another. Also, saffron has a pretty distinct flavor and sweet earthy aroma that these alternatives simply don't have. It might be a bit more difficult when it comes to other substitutes, such as, for example, colored corn silk. Corn silk is fine, thread-like strands found on corn cobs. When they're dried and colored in red, they can resemble saffron threads. However, if you look carefully, you'll notice that corn silk is usually uniform in shape along their entire length, unlike the trumpet-like shape of saffron. Saffron threads are more distinct and separate, while corn silk tends to clump together. Also remember that real saffron often has those characteristic orange tips, which are not that easy to fake. However, one thing to keep in mind is that if you come across very high quality premium saffron, it may actually have very little to no orange tips at all. The stigmas are usually pretty long, intact, and have a deep and even dark red color. But even then, you can still tell if it's real saffron by its obvious trumpet-like shape and by the strong, warm aroma. There are a few other substitutes for saffron that usually have a similar appearance and, if artificially colored in red, can resemble it pretty closely. But if you take your time in the shop, pick up a few threads and carefully examine them, considering all the features I've mentioned, you will be able to tell if it's real. I also strongly advise to always examine the spice both as individual threads and as a whole handful, because another trick that you may encounter in Morocco is that real saffron can be mixed with substitutes. So pay close attention to ensure that the overall mass looks as uniform as possible. Look for consistency and make sure that some threads don't look different from others. You've probably heard that saffron is one of the world's most expensive spices. It takes over 150 flowers to make only 1 gram of saffron. So you should avoid any suspiciously cheap options. But while this is true, I definitely wouldn't rely on the high price alone when shopping in touristy areas in the Medina, since sellers may of course purposely increase the price, claiming that it is real saffron. So I would primarily rely on my own close examination of the product, plus you can also conduct a famous water test. All you need to do is take a few saffron threads, about 5 to 10, put them into a small container with cold or room temperature water, and then wait for about 10 to 15 minutes. Real saffron very slowly releases a rich golden yellow color, while the threads themselves retain their red color. If the water turns yellow immediately, turns red instead of yellow, does not change color at all, or if the threads lose their color, then what you have in that container is not real saffron. This simple test can be particularly helpful if you are uncertain after visual examination, and some reputable spice merchants will even let you perform this test in their shop. Also, after they soak, natural saffron threads will remain intact if you rub them between your fingers. Fake ones, on the other hand, tend to fall apart or crumble easily. It is of course a bit complicated to do such tests in the shop, but you can negotiate with the seller and ask to take maybe 5 to 10 threads home to see if you like it. If a shop is confident in its product and has nothing to hide, it normally won't refuse this reasonable request. That being said, try not to buy prepacked spice that you cannot examine properly, unless you are purchasing from a reputable shop that you trust. And remember, never buy saffron in powder form, because it is even easier to fake and you will not be able to know what exactly you are buying. In the description box below, I will leave someone else's great video showing exactly how real saffron and its alternatives react during the water test, so I really suggest you watch it. Argan oil. Another very popular item that can be easily faked is, of course, Morocco's liquid gold, argan oil. There are countless shops, especially in the Medina, that sell various argan oil items, but just like saffron, it is actually an expensive product, so it can be diluted with other substances, such as sunflower oil or others, and you won't even know how much argan oil a product actually contains. I'm by no means an expert, but I would be very, very careful when buying argan oil in any touristy areas of the Medina. Ideally, you should be looking for official certifications like EcoCert or IGP labels on the products. These guarantee that the oil is authentic and properly produced. The most authentic argan oil comes from women's cooperatives. Let me explain what these are. They're special organizations where local women traditionally process argan nuts into oil. These cooperatives are often supported by the government, and they help local women earn a living. The best part is that you can visit these places and watch how they make the oil right in front of you, and then you can buy it freshly made. Most of these cooperatives are located in these regions. These areas are where authentic argan oil actually comes from, as argan tree grows primarily in southwestern Morocco. So if your trip includes visiting these regions, it is definitely worth buying your argan oil there rather than in popular touristy cities. But of course, not everyone can travel there, and if you're staying in places like Marrakech or Fez, for example, but still want to buy argan oil, there are a few things to keep in mind. 1. As I said, look for shops that have proper certification displays. These are very important as they somehow guarantee authenticity. 2. I would suggest staying away from shops that are clearly set up for tourists, and instead try to find places where Moroccan people themselves go shopping. If you're worried too much, it might be even safer to buy it in high-end natural product stores outside of Medina. 3. Do not buy argan oil in shops where you can't test it, and avoid any vendors that have a really large amount of various bottles stuck together in rows. That's not a good sign. 4. Remember that argan oil should not be stored in a transparent plastic container. A real one would most likely be sold in a dark glass bottle to protect the oil from light exposure. 5. Argan oil comes in two types, cosmetic and cooking. Cosmetic argan oil has a light amber or medium honey color, while the cooking version has a medium dark honey tone or deeper amber golden tone. It should not be too pale or bright, vibrant yellow, but rather warm, moderate golden. It also should have good clarity but not be completely transparent. Real argan oil is supposed to have a light nutty aroma, with a stronger nutty scent if you're buying oil for cooking. And do not purchase any oil with artificial scent if they're cosmetic, as they are most likely added to hide the scent from mixed oils. And always test argan oil in the store. You should warm a small amount between your fingers before smelling to properly detect the authentic aroma. 6. I really recommend taking some time to research shops' locations online based on other people's reviews, or look for well-established natural shops that have been operating for many years. And of course, they must show proper certification for their products. Be wary of low prices. Authentic argan oil is expensive to produce. These shops should also be able to thoroughly explain how their oil is made and answer any questions you might have about the production process. 7. In some shops, you might find a special machine where the owner can quickly squeeze argan oil for you straight from the kernel. We actually encountered one of these shops in the Medina of Rabat. The seller had lots of different seeds and used the machine to extract oils within just a few seconds, and we could see the whole process. This is, of course, way more reliable than buying a pre-packed product without any certification. But I found information that it is still not the same high-quality argan oil, because traditional authentic oil production is a lengthy manual process, while a machine forces the oil out way too quickly. The traditional method takes about 45 minutes of careful hand kneading to release the oil naturally, which helps preserve all its beneficial properties. However, the place we visited claimed to be a cosmetic shop, and this oil was supposed to be used only for skin, not for cooking, so it was good enough for that purpose. 8. If you are not looking for pure oil and just want to buy a pre-bottled beauty product for skin or hair in a touristy shop, you probably shouldn't expect it to contain a good amount of real argan oil. Many of these products may contain minimal amounts of the actual oil, despite what their packaging might suggest. So you could probably buy it just out of curiosity to try something local rather than having real benefits. Now, let's recap. You definitely can find authentic, high-quality argan oil even outside of the regions where it is produced. However, when we talk about touristy areas of the Medinas, you have to be very careful and not have high expectations. As you know, just like in every touristy place in any country, you need to stay vigilant and do your research first. Don't skip looking up reliable shops online before your trip. The best option would be buying from women's cooperatives in these regions. But if your trip doesn't include these areas, make sure to look for shops that have proper certifications like EcoCert or IGP labels. Rugs. And last but definitely not least, let's talk about rugs. If you're planning to buy a rug, which is another popular purchase among tourists, keep in mind that this is actually really challenging. These are a few things you should know. Firstly, there are two main types of rug production. Handmade rugs are created individually by artisans, which make each piece unique. They typically take weeks, if not months, to make, and usually use natural materials like wool, and they are way more expensive. They are also more durable and can last for generations. Often, if you look at the back of a handmade rug, you'll see that the pattern is similar to the front, and you can spot individual knots that are slightly irregular or might be even rough. But keep in mind that small imperfections and subtle color variations due to natural dyes are actually a good sign. Machine-made rugs, on the other hand, are mass-produced, which makes them much more affordable. While they can still look very beautiful, the quality and durability usually aren't the same as handmade ones. Although not always the case, the back side feels stiffer or canvas-like, and the patterns are perfectly uniform throughout. While some high-quality machine-made rugs are made with 100% wool, many, especially those sold for tourists, contain synthetic fibers. These can feel similar at first touch, but they don't wear or age like natural wool. Neither option is necessarily good or bad. It really depends on what you're looking for and your budget. Just make sure that you know what you are actually buying. Now, let's talk about some serious issues that you can encounter as a tourist, assuming that you want to buy a good quality handmade rug. First, one of the most common scams is selling machine-made rugs as if they were handmade. In many tourist-friendly rug shops, especially in Medinas, you'll be shown dozens of beautiful carpets and told that they're all handcrafted by Berber women or local artisans. You usually will be told stories about those local artisans, traditional techniques, and family heritage. Sometimes you'll even see women sitting in a loom in those shops, making rugs right in front of you. But in reality, that's often staged. It's all part of experience for tourists. Many women are often just hired to demonstrate weaving process, while the actual rugs for sale are mass-produced in factories. Another big problem is extreme price inflation. Tourists are consistently charged up to 10 times more than fair market value when buying a rug. The initial prices quoted to tourists are systematically inflated far beyond a reasonable markup. For example, a genuine handmade rug that should cost 2,000 Moroccan dirhams might be offered for 12 or even 15,000. Or if it is a machine-made rug, which is being sold as handmade, the situation is even worse. For example, a machine-made rug worth 500 Moroccan dirhams might be sold as authentic handmade for 5,000 or more. So keep in mind that even after extensive bargaining, you might still pay way more than you should, and unfortunately, many tourists do. These are just examples and approximate prices. To be honest, you never know how much money a vendor might ask you for. As someone said, it often seems to be down to how gullible the vendor thinks you are and how much they think they can get away with charging. Another major issue is the intense pressure techniques designed to make you feel obligated to buy. You will be often invited for an elaborate mint tea ceremony where you might sit for 30 minutes while multiple family members or shop assistants bring you dozens of beautiful carpets, creating a whole show around your visit. They will tell you stories about each rug's origin, offer you more tea and even sweets, and create a very personal, friendly atmosphere. Then comes the psychological pressure. The seller will claim, "This is a special price only for you. I never do this for any other customers." Or act genuinely hurt when you are trying to negotiate. The goal is to make you feel guilty for wasting their time and not buying anything after hospitality and attention. Remember, This is all a well-practiced sales performance designed to create emotional obligation. Also, do not let any guide walk you into a rug store, or any store for that matter. Whether it's your official tour guide or a guide offered by your riad, simply say that you are not interested, even if you really like your guide. If you're working with a tour group and don't have a choice, just don't buy anything. The reason is simple. These guides receive substantial commissions from the shops that they bring you to, and they're really skilled at making their recommendations seem genuine, saying things like, "My cousin has the best shop," or "I know a place where locals buy," not the tourist traps. They will claim that they're doing you a favor by bringing you to special places with family prices, but in reality, these shops are specifically set up for tourists. So yes, even if you genuinely like your guide, remember that their income depends on where they take you to and how much you spend. And another crucial thing, unless you are in a really reputable shop, be skeptical when a seller claims that their rug is very old or vintage and uses this to justify a really high price. This is actually quite common for new rugs to be made using traditional methods and designs and then artificially aged to look older. If you're specifically interested in buying a genuine vintage rug, you'll need to do a really proper research beforehand and shop at established antique dealers. Real vintage rugs should come with provenance documentation, so always ask to see these papers. Well, what to do in this case? Unfortunately, when we talk about shops in the Medinas, especially in popular cities, it is highly unlikely that you'll get a good deal buying a rug. It's a really big business with so many tricks and traps that unless you are an expert, you probably won't really know what you are buying anyway. Even if you're lucky and get a real handmade rug, the vendor will still profit enormously. It's nearly impossible to negotiate the price down to what the rug is actually worth, because dozens of tourists pay inflated prices every single day. And if you are not willing to pay, the next customer will. I've noticed that nowadays many vendors barely negotiate down to reasonable prices and will just simply let you go if you are unhappy, because they're used to more compliant tourists who pay way more. The safest way is once again to go directly to women's cooperatives or remote artisan communities. These are the places where carpets are actually made, and you'll be able to buy directly from the women who create them. Now, I've done a lot of research on such places, and I must say it was pretty challenging. To keep things easier, I'm going to simply put a table on the screen with a list of locations, organizations, and additional important details that you can screenshot. Just make sure to turn on a 2K resolution in this video for a clearer result. The main challenge when it comes to remote options speaks for itself. You need to plan ahead and find out how to get there. Some of these places are more accessible, but some require long drives, sometimes even four-wheel drive vehicles, and you might even need to arrange a local driver. But honestly, it's worth it, because not only will you avoid tourist traps and get a real deal, but you will also support actual local artisans. I know that this might seem too complicated or adventurous for many of you, especially if you have limited time or don't feel comfortable going to remote areas. So if that's the case, I've looked up some city-based options that seem to be quite reputable and have a lot of positive reviews. Some of them appear to be safer options than the others, so check this table as well and make sure to read the footnotes. Of course, I cannot guarantee that everything will go smoothly there, because these places are located in cities, but they're at least better regulated according to my research and should be more reliable than majority of shops in the Medina. And these were all my tips for today. So please, shop wisely. Do not waste your money on fake or low quality products. And I'll see you soon in my next video. Bye!